So, if you've listened to this podcast, you've probably heard me mention Stoicism a few times. Cub and I had a little discussion about it when we were both kind of getting into it. Or I got into it quite some years ago, but not really serious about it until some recent years. And the thing is, I read every day. I read a lot of personal development stuff, a lot of business books and things like that. But the interesting thing about Stoicism is out of all of that stuff, the thing that really helped me improve the most is the stuff that I learned from Stoicism. And that's the thing that's kind of crazy about it, because it was founded, I think, the year 300 BCE. So, you know, it's kind of cool that this information is so timeless, even though it was someone, I don't know if they came up with it or if maybe other philosophers had talked about this stuff, but, you know, over 2,000 years old. And still, this is the stuff that really sticks the most with me. So what I was thinking to do is there's a book called the Enchiridion. It's pulled from teachings from a guy called Epictetus. And it's meant to be sort of a handbook for following Stoic philosophy and applying it to your life. And so I thought it might be cool to go into some of these passages and sort of break them down not break them down, but sort of apply them to graffiti and life, and sort of share some of the things that I learned from them and some of the concepts. So what I think I'll do is just read a piece of it and then talk about it. So we're going to start with chapter 1. It's understanding what is under your control and what is not. So I can't remember what translation I got this from. There's so many different translations. That's the other kind of thing that's weird about it. Trying to learn about Stoicism is like what translation to read. Because if you think about something that was written like 2,000 years ago, even if it was translated into English, you know, some 100 years later, the English that they used was quite a bit different. So I'll link the translation in the show notes in case you want to get it. But the thing about the Enchiridion is it's a really cool thing to read, but it's also important to understand some of the concepts in Stoicism, or some of them might not make a lot of sense. So anyway, let's start here. I'll read a little passage and then we'll break it down. So it goes, some things in life are under your control and others are not. What are things under your total control? What you believe, what you desire or hate, and what you are attracted to or avoid. You have complete control over these, so they are free, not subject to restraint or hindrance. They concern you because they are under your control. What things are not under your total control? Your body, property, reputation, status, and the like. Because they are not under your total control, they are weak, slavish, subject to restraint, and in the power of others. They do not concern you because they are outside of your control. So, let's talk about this for a second. So when you look at, let's talk about it in the context of graffiti. So let's say you want to come up with a certain style, say, you know, wild style or whatever. So there's certain things that are under your control and certain things that aren't. So the interesting thing when you think about it, you can make the decision to do all the work required to achieve this style that you want to achieve, but that outcome is actually not under your control. There's a lot of factors that could come into play. So what is under your control in that regard is the amount of work you put in, the actions you take. If you're going to draw, research, do all these kinds of things, you can put in all of that time and still not get the end result that you were expecting. We've all experienced this where you have something in your head and you go to draw it and it doesn't come out the way you imagined. So that's kind of putting it into context and showing you that there are certain things that are within your control and certain things that aren't. And a lot of times that it's hard to establish. Like you sort of think like, well, yeah, that is under my control. Like if I want to learn wild style, I'll just practice and then I'll learn wild style. But it's possible that maybe you won't. Maybe something else will come out of it. That end result is sort of something that's not completely up to you. So the idea that my understanding of it is the amount of energy you can waste focusing on things that are outside of your control and getting upset about them, or not having some sort of indifference about those things. You can burn quite a bit of energy where you could be putting those things into the parts that you can control and end up getting better results. So another example I thought of is like if you wanted to have a certain standing in the graffiti culture. I feel like I've talked about this before, but like if you wanted to be like a master at piecing, or like an all city bomber, king, well recognized, infamous, all this kind of shit. So your actions are under your control. You can decide to map out all the areas you need to go to establish this all city reputation and all this kind of stuff. And you can do all the work. You can do all of the things that are within your control, but at the same time, you may not get the recognition that you expected. You may not get that level of notoriety that you expected because other people's opinions of what you do is completely out of your control. You can only do the things that you think are going to get that stuff. But then outside of that, it's not on you, So the idea here, because I've met a lot of writers that you see complaints and they put blame on other people and things like that. They'll say, oh, this writer did this and this and that back in this and this and this time, and they don't really get the recognition they deserve, or they're talking about themselves. I did this and this and that, and I'm not getting the shine that I'm supposed to be getting, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like that energy that you're spending being concerned about the opinions of other people or things that are outside of your control, it's wasted. So let me just read another passage here. If you think you can control things over which you have no control, then you will be hindered and disturbed. You will start complaining and become a fault-finding person. But if you deal with only those things under your control, no one can force you to do anything you don't want to do. No one can stop you. You will have no enemy, and no harm will come to you. So this one is a little hard to understand, and well, at least it is for me. There's part of it like, when they say no harm will come to you. So my mind goes to like worst case scenario. So it's like, so you're telling me if somebody chops my arm off, that, that's harm came to me, So the way that Epictetus talks about it, and my understanding of it, and another famous Stoic philosophers talk about it in this way, that it's like, no matter what somebody does to you, you can still have freedom within your mind. That's the one thing that somebody can't fuck with is your mind. If you manage to get to this point where you have control over that. That's a whole long conversation. I'll try to tighten this up a little bit, but so if you look at Stoic philosophy and they look at it in this way that it's the vast majority of us, almost all of us, are going to always be students of it, no matter how much you practice. So like people like Epictetus, which is one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, he was still a student of it. They have this sort of level when you finish your education and you're completely not so much education, but education and training. I don't know if those could be separated, but it's if you completely understand all of the concepts and you're living your life completely adhering to these concepts, then they consider you finished with your education. Almost nobody gets to that point. And I believe the Stoics only considered Socrates to be what's referred to as a sage. It's somebody that they've reached the top of their shit, and they're following all the stuff. Their education is complete. So what I find really interesting about this philosophy is when you look at some of the people, you know, you look at Epictetus, he was a slave. He was sold into slavery when he was a kid. So he didn't have true freedom for some time. He was eventually freed, but he was I believe he was following the Stoic philosophy while he was a slave. Even if he wasn't, he knows what it's like to come from that pretty much worst case scenario. And then you look at the whole other side. There's a guy called Marcus Aurelius, and he was a Roman emperor, and they were alive at the same time. I think Epictetus was a little older and came a little before him. So if these two people from completely opposite sides can study this philosophy and benefit from it, I think any of us could as well. So I got off a little bit on a tangent there, but to get back into the passage that I just read, mainly the part where if you think you can control things that you can't control and you're sitting there focusing on it, that you're going to be hindered and disturbed. You see a lot of that in the world pretty much all the time, but right now it's pretty crazy. Like, think about all the stuff that you're seeing and all these people on both sides of whatever divide you want to look at. There's several different ones going on. There's a lot of people that are really frustrated because they can't control the other side. They can't get other people to see the way that they see. That stuff is not up to you. You can put out information, and you can try to educate people on whatever side you believe is right, but they're either gonna believe you or they're not. And for you to sit there and spend a lot of energy being pissed off because one side doesn't believe the same shit you do, you're wasting a ton of energy. You could be putting all of that energy into doing the shit you can control, and think about how much more productive you would be if you did that. So I'll read a part of another passage. If you want the substantial rewards in life, you should be prepared to put in the effort. This means you may have to give up some things entirely and postpone others for now. If you attempt to get both, what is under your control and what is not, you may end up getting neither. Therefore, you need to distinguish the two very clearly. How do you tell the difference? Start by challenging everything that appears disagreeable. Quote, "You are only an appearance. Let me fully understand what you are," end quote. Then, using the distinction we talked about, examine it, see if it is under your control. If it is not within your control, it is nothing to you. There is nothing to worry about. So another kind of thing that's, I don't know, it could be kind of hard to really get your head around, for me at least. I've heard this talked about from other people that study Stoicism, and my understanding is the idea is if you're going after things that are outside of your control, which is like a lot of things. So imagine if you set goals for yourself, like material goals or business goals or graffiti goals, any of that kind of stuff, like we had talked about, there's that outcome is out of your control. So my understanding of this is that, let's say you have these goals that we just talked about, and you're focused on both understanding the things that you can control and putting all your focus on that, or putting a lot of focus on that, and you're focusing on the outcome. My understanding of what this is saying is that you may end up not getting either. And it's better to put 100% focus on the things that you can control. So for example, let's go back to the analogy of, say you wanted to be a all-city bomber and you wanted everybody to know who you were. There's two things you could focus on there. You could focus on that outcome. I want to go in the yard and have everybody go, "Oh, you're so-and-so," and everybody's coming around you and asking you to sign their book and all this kind of shit, and you're focused on that outcome. You're taking a lot of focus away of the things that you can control. So what I understand this passage to be is if you were to not focus on the outcome and just focus on what it is that you need to be doing right now, that's going to get you further. So I kind of believe that. I mean, it's interesting because I do both. I try to focus on winning every day. I set out my tasks for the day so that I can move the needle forward, and whatever it is that I try to move the needle forward in all aspects of my life. So my relationship, my mind, my body, my business. I set goals for the day, all of the things that I need to do. So I need to exercise, I need to read, I need to hang out with my girlfriend and my dogs, and I need to get certain things done within my business in order to move the needle forward in all aspects of my life. If I were to want to focus on, say, moving the needle forward in my graffiti career, there would be another list of things that I would need to do. So there's something to be said about just focusing on that day and the things that you could do right then, because those are the things that are within your control to a certain degree. You can control the actions you take to achieve that outcome, but taking your focus off of that outcome may actually make it more attainable because you're really hyper focused on the things that you can do right now.
There are certain things that the more we try to control, ultimately we're actually really pushing that shit away from us even further and further out of reach, in my experience. The more that I tried to have a grasp on something and think that I was in full control over the outcome and how this person or this thing was going to react to me and how they should and my expectation, this shit fucking leads to resentments, and then it's even further out of your fucking control, and then you start losing your whole grip on why you're doing this shit in the first place. So, in my experience, the best thing that I have pulled from this, which is what you just sparked this with, which is what little control we have over certain things, and not so much to focus on all the things we don't have control over, because that list is long as shit. It's I believe more of a benefit to gear all your attention towards the things you do have control over, which is the basics. That what's right in front of you at this very moment, the way you take care of yourself and the way you respond to whatever you're up against right now.
All right, good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And stay up.